After the early morning, the city is as prosperous as the City of Hope. Even in the most secure Queen's area, there are few pedestrians. According to Grelint's analysis, this aspect is due to the fact that there are too many insecurities in the extraordinary world. Even ordinary people who have not been exposed to extraordinary power have more or less heard that many people lost their lives due to accidents at night. Story. On the other hand, because the world has not achieved large-scale electricity use, street lighting at night can only use gas, which is relatively backward. Withdrawing his gaze towards the orifice window, Grelint sighed, still having difficulty falling asleep. Maybe this is Lord Yehailong. Grelint sighed in a low voice. If it's just in the book and in the text to experience the fantasy and beauty of the extraordinary world, I'm quite happy and yearning. But if it's the real world, I can only say that I hope that the gods will bless the death not too miserable. When he was on Earth, his original name was Zhong Jianchu. He was a migrant worker who had just graduated. He usually didn't have many hobbies, mainly reading online articles and playing games. Recently, he has just finished reading the book Mystery under the help of his college roommate Amway. He naturally yearned for the extraordinary abilities in the book, but Zhong Jianchu could only say too much about the distorted and chaotic bottom-level world rules. I don't know why, today, no, it should be yesterday's daytime, and the Earth's clock book replaced the Queen's Grelint. The reason for using the word replace. This is because although he calls himself Grelint, he is very clear that he is only receiving and reading Grelint's memory as a bystander, without any memory fusion. This also made it difficult for him to adapt to his current status. Somewhat unexpectedly, Grelint completely inherited the knowledge of the original book that he remembered on Earth, without any problems. Although I basically don't remember the details of mysticism, I'm sure I know the starry sky. This shows that I am involved in a high-ranking personality. Which he wrote it? Or is it something involving a high-ranking magical item? Due to the lack of analytical conditions, Grelint could not come to a conclusion. In addition, for his own state, he can only basically determine Klein who is different from the original book, because he has read the original book, which is impossible for those Bacon in the original book. As for the timeline of this mysterious world, Grelint judged that it was about half a year before the protagonist Klein Moretti came into the world. The basis is that next Thursday, that is, 5 days later, it will be the 17th birthday party of Audrey Hall, the youngest daughter of Earl Hall, the real aristocrat of Backlund, a member of the upper house of the kingdom, and the big banker, and now it is 10. Early February. As a fan of Audrey in the original book, with the identity of her boyfriend as her best friend, Grelint was quite excited. There seems to be no mention of Audrey's birthday in the original book, only the socially meaningful bar mitzvah is set at the end of next year. Of course, next week's birthday party is only private. The reason why Grelint received the invitation, one was because he had a good personal relationship with Audrey, and the other was the Viscount who died young. Grelint's father, Lawrence Mariano, was once a firm believer in Earl Hall. Political allies. After Lawrence Mariano died of illness, the Intis celebrity Sharmila Bal-Antat, who was married to him, was Grelint's biological mother and remarried back to her home country. The Intis Republic is much more open than the Lone Kingdom. And Shamila Barada was originally the only daughter of the Lord. Grelint can only say that he is very happy about this. After all, it is very difficult to treat an acquaintance who doesn't know each other as a real relative, and it is quite easy to reveal the truth. Grelint was only 16 when Lawrence Mariano died. Alone and helpless, he almost got the Viscount title from Earl Hall, so he can be said to have great respect for this elder. Regrettably, Earl Hall is an outsider after all, and it is inconvenient for him to over-discipline Grelint. As a result, the Viscount himself is almost incompetent and can only be said to be polite. Not bad, let's just say that he is also a nobleman. He is much richer than the protagonist of the original novel. Grelint secretly complained. As a Viscount without real power, Grelint's wealth mainly came from two parts. One is that £100,000 are handed over to Earl Hall's bank for operation, and the annual income is about £9,000. The second is the land, pastures and forests worth £120,000, and the annual rent income is £12,000. However, he fully believed in Earl Hall's vision, so he sold all the estates in the past 2 years, with a total of £220,000, half invested in the bank and half in the shipping industry. Annual income is around £21,000. Facts have proved that Earl Hall is very wise and far-sighted. Now Grelint has £250,000 of investment assets and a monthly income of £2,000. In addition, he has 5 estates, 2 large and 3 small and medium. There's this big mansion in Queens, 2 properties in Bridgewood, 2 in Hillston, and a cottage on the west side. Of course, most of these wealth are difficult to embezzle in large quantities, and Grelint's real activity funds are slightly less than £15,000. Although Grelint thinks that he is not extravagant, but it involves the decency of the nobles, so the consumption is actually a bit exaggerated. Because he lives alone, he has relatively few servants. There was a butler, a valet, a squire, 2 maids, a laundry maid, a coachman, a gardener, and a cook. To be honest, even if Grelint was fully capable of paying them, he thought it was too extravagant and unnecessary. Perhaps it was poverty that limited his imagination. He thought that even if he needed service, hiring 2 or 3 servants would be enough. Thinking about these miscellaneous things, Grelint slowly entered the dream state after all. Early in the morning, Grelint was awakened by the valet Hash. Today is Saturday, and he is going to visit Earl Hall to ask how to become an extraordinary. This is the established agenda of arranging servants to send salutations yesterday. Mr. Mariano, do you want to dress more formally or casually? Hash didn't know what Grelint's purpose was today. In the past, Grelint used to visit Earl Hall or Audrey more casually. First, because he did not inherit the title, he only visited friends in the form of visiting elders. The second is basically nothing. But today Grelint has other plans, so he decided to be a little more formal. Formal attire, a little more leisurely, Uncle Hall is not an outsider. Okay, Mr. Mariano. Under the service of the footman, Grelint finished his breakfast quite uncomfortably. Right now, the focus is on being familiar with the environment, and this process will definitely be changed in the future. Grelint secretly made up his mind. In the last life, let's just count the whole life, Grelint also had his parents divorced when he was a child. Such an experience makes him almost incapable of getting much security from interpersonal interactions, which is the main reason for his desire for extraordinary power. In addition, after reading the original work, he still has a lot of places that are deeply infected, and he has a lot of regrets. Maybe God sent him, the person who knew the plot, to come here hoping to change something? Grelint's villa in Queens is not too far from Earl Hall's villa, which made him not even able to write a good draft, only a few suitable words. Good morning, our lovely new Mr. Viscount. Grelint just turned 20 and inherited the title not long ago. Greetings is Audrey's eldest brother, the eldest son of Earl Hall, Hibbert Hall. This nobleman's face has a classically handsome face, his stature is slightly higher than that of Grelint, and his body is obviously stronger, not as thin as Grelint. In fact, due to the difference in age, Grelint and this noble disciple can only say that they have a certain friendship, but they are not familiar with each other. However, the other party has always regarded him as a younger brother, closer to or even more than his second younger brother who has the right to inherit. Good morning, Hibbert, you are still as enthusiastic as ever. Of course, I welcome you very much. Hilt warmly introduced him into the reception room, and Earl Hall had not yet appeared. In fact, Grelint has come into this reception room many times, but all of them are as children. Now, seeing the neatly tidy, clean, and bright desk, and the regularly placed bookshelves at the back, Grelint was inexplicably timid. In his previous life, he was only a small person. Are you still drinking coffee? 2 sugar cubes? Dad just received a message, so he might come over a little later. It has to be said that Hilt's familiar way of hospitality makes Grelint very comfortable. Yes, thank you. Actually, I prefer to drink tea, but I have to try my best to pretend to be like the old Grelint, who murmured silently. Uncle Hall seems to be very busy recently. Grelint asked casually. This is what he analyzed based on his memory that Earl Hall hadn't supervised him in the last month. Normally, Earl Hall would send a letter or urge him once or twice a month, unless he was too busy to think of it for a while. Hillet nodded. Some laws need to be adjusted, but I don't know for the moment. Grelint, who had read the original book, knew that the repeal of the Corn Act should be involved. Unfortunately, he didn't have a reasonable reason to say the result, so he could only nod lightly to show that he didn't know and wasn't very interested. Good morning, Grelint. Hearing this brisk and familiar voice, Grelint knew who was coming in. Audrey was wearing a long white dress with ruffles, with a delicate face and a dignified manner. Good morning, Audrey, you have a different beauty every day. Grelint turned his head and smiled as naturally as possible. Frankly speaking, such a bright and clean Audrey really makes people feel ashamed. You look worried? Is there something bothering you? She is really a smart girl, maybe she is born to be suitable for the audience. No, it's nothing to worry about, it's a trivial matter. Grelint dispelled the emotion on his face and smiled naturally. That's good. Audrey nodded, and out of the corner of the eye swept the figure of Earl Hall. Dad is here. I won't interrupt your conversation. See you later. I hope we can see you later, provided that the Count does not prevent me from telling you about Beyonders. Grelint smiled and waved as Audrey left the reception room, and Hilt also took the opportunity to leave. Sit down, don't be nervous. Don't feel like you're being interrogated every time you talk to me. Earl Hall didn't talk too much, and his tone was very easygoing, which effectively relieved Grelint's tense nerves. Okay, Uncle Hall. Grelint sat down in response, not knowing how to ask. The last time you inherited the title, I asked you what direction you want to develop. Why? Have you made a decision now? This is not wrong in a sense, but unfortunately I hope to develop in the transcendent direction. Yes, Uncle Hall, I think I should do something meaningful. For example. Earl Hall took a sip of coffee, non-committal. He remembered that Grelint had always been quite lazy, and basically had nothing serious except being interested in supernatural powers. To be honest, Earl Hall does not approve of the so-called extraordinary power developed by the nobles themselves. Wealth can effectively drive sequence 5 or even sequence 4 or less extraordinary people, but high sequences have to take 2 huge risks, which is not in line with the concept of capital investment. Grelint's face froze, his mind suddenly brightened, and he realized that Earl Hall realized his purpose. But he didn't want to show that he realized it. Taking a deep breath, Grelint straightened the corner of his clothes and said seriously, Uncle Hall, I want to be an extraordinary. Earl Hall raised his brows lightly. Tell me your reasons. He did not directly deny or refuse. Grelint looked overjoyed. I think the confidence that regime and wealth brought me is like the love my mother Bellotta has for me. I don't deny their authenticity, and I don't acknowledge their solidity. This is the core point of Grelint, and it is also the point that Earl Hall could not convince him. Extraordinary power may be easier to get out of control than power and wealth. Earl Hall frowned a little bit. He was no stranger to this. Extraordinary people call it a terrible thing out of control, and even make extraordinary people no longer a man, but turned into a walking monster. Of course, Grelint is no stranger to this, but he knows that very few people who really understand acting are naturally out of control. He didn't refute any more, just silently confronted him. Seeing this, Earl Hall suddenly realized that the child had made up his mind long ago, and no amount of words would be in vain. When is it? It didn't seem so resolute before. What path do you want to take? In the silent stalemate, Earl Hall broke the silence. Wei Wei paused, it's fine outside of the officialdom. Krillint's eyes lit up a little. The official Night Watcher, Deputy Punisher and Mechanical Heart are the information of extraordinary people known by many nobles in the Lone Kingdom. Of course, most of the nobles have not really seen extraordinary power. Earl Hall should think that I only know a very small amount of sequence information outside of the 3 major churches of Lone. This is in line with Krillint's character. A curious, UU reading www. The children of nobles who do not have access to UUGonshu.com are most likely just interested in a certain magical ability. But he didn't know that I was actually very clear about all sequence pathways. Uncle Hall, my father, Lawrence Mariano was once a Beyonder, right? The basis of Krillint's judgment is that in his memory, his father was not good at politics, but he used to be a real power aristocrat. Earl Hall nodded, you are smarter than I thought. He is a judge, do you want to inherit his will? Judge's path, sequence 6. The middle sequence can't control heredity, not to mention that he probably didn't become a judge when I was born. So I don't need to consider the conflict of Beyonder characteristics, I can only go through the question of the judge's path. I choose lawyer, I wonder if Uncle Hall understands this. The corners of Krillint's mouth twitched. With the power displayed by Earl Hall, it should be relatively easy to appear in the official lawyers and arbitrators. Earl Hall didn't know the relationship between the sequences, and didn't ask any more questions, just nodded, follow me. As for why he chose the lawyer route, Krillint can only say that it is completely intuitive. Just when I recalled the ability of a lawyer's sequence, a strong impulse emerged. This way is related to me, sure. Damn, this is definitely tricky. But such an obvious temptation doesn't seem like a big boss's pit? Or does he want me to think in this direction? Following Earl Hall, Krillint's eyes gradually deepened. If it is said that I am a normal ancient person like Klein, it is more likely that there is something strange in me that is a lawyer or an arbitrator, and it may be an angel. This is a reasonable thinking based on the law of extraordinary characteristics aggregation. But unfortunately I'm not. Krillint said silently. For this world, he can predict the future, which is against the upper limit of this world's power. Because even a big boss who claims to predict the direction of the era can only intervene manually. Krillint's first thought was the existence of fictional worlds and dream worlds, but this would be completely unverifiable and impossible to falsify. Such thinking would be meaningless. From a perspective within the world, even if this world is illusory and imaginary relative to another world, it is real and objective to me. Strictly speaking, Krillint believes that there is no strong or weak point in all pathways. The audience of the original work is particularly powerful, and Krillint believes that it is more that the big guy has a good plan. And his own goal is a demigod or an angel, so there is no need to consider the sequence 0 at the top. So the full sequence doesn't make much difference to him. One of the reasons why I decided to take the lawyer's route is because of the impulse that I just didn't know, and the second is that the formula is relatively easy. Yes, that's right, Krillint's target was the Dark Emperor, a blasphemous card made by Emperor Roselle and temporarily stored in the heart of machines. And Earl Hall is not an extraordinary after all, although his financial resources are amazing. With a high probability, we can only collect the 3 official schools and lawyers arbitrators that appear more in the Lone Kingdom. The destination that Earl Hall led Krillint to was a hidden basement, and Krillint vaguely discerned that the above should be the treasure house of the villa. Krillint's villa also has a treasure trove, but only a small amount of jewelry. Not to mention Beyonder materials, there are not even the general spiritual materials mentioned in the original work, so it can be seen that they were deliberately handled. The stairs going down are a little narrow, and the lights are dim, adding a sense of mystery out of thin air. As a believer of the goddess, in order to ensure our safety, my villa is protected by an official Beyonder. But this is not enough insurance, so I also hired an extraordinary who usually rests below when I don't leave the villa. He will be your teacher. I don't know the name of his sequence, but I only know that he is a middle sequence. He has high physical fitness and rich fighting skills, and is proficient in a variety of magical spells. Earl Hall's words gradually became richer, and he introduced Grelint in advance. Grelint listened silently without interjecting. He had several guesses about the sequence described by the Earl, but could not be further determined due to lack of information. With the sound of creaking, the heavy wooden door was pushed open, followed by the smell of a little dust. What catches the eye is a long wooden table placed horizontally, with exquisite and beautiful patterns. Under the vent on the left, a middle-aged man in his 50s leaned leisurely on the leather sofa. He was wearing a blue-purple robe and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose. He looked like a scholar. "Good morning, Your Excellency, and little Mariano." The thick and magnetic middle-aged male voice sounded very reliable. "Good morning, Joffrey." "Good morning, Your Excellency, you seem to know me." Grelint confirmed that he had never seen this person. "Of course, your father used to be my reliable fighting partner. It's a pity that my strength is limited, and it's a pity that I can't avenge him." Joffrey sighed, but Grelint was a little surprised. "Vengeance? Didn't my father die of normal illness?" "You mean yes, that's right. In order to protect you, your father didn't want you to come into contact with supernatural powers. We followed his will to hide all this. But now that you have chosen this path, I think it is my responsibility to tell you everything, and this is also your responsibility. Unfortunately, I am a fake." Grelint nodded silently, with a heavy expression on his face. He could only say that there were too many words in his heart. He confirmed that the other party was not an audience sequence. "What kind of ancient net text routine is this?" The transmigrator who shoulders the revenge of killing his father, to some extent, he is still a half-orphan. "Of course, I don't think your late father, nor us, would want you to be blinded by hatred. Until you don't have enough strength, we won't tell you the real enemy's name and strength." Grelint nodded heavily. "I completely understand your thoughts. I don't think I'll ever have enough strength, otherwise we'll just pretend there's no such thing. After all, I really don't have any hatred with people." "Okay, Grelint, this is your Uncle Cole. He will be your occult teacher. Joffrey, the kid Grelint will be handed over to you. He wants to be a lawyer. There is still some work in the upper court, so I won't accompany you." Earl Hall was not interested in extraordinary affairs, so he got up and left. "I thought you would inherit your father's will and become an excellent judge." Joffrey Cole heard curiously. Grelint just thought about his words. "Uncle Cole, I once saw a lawyer show his outstanding eloquence, and he was originally a dumb person who is not good at words. This makes me feel very magic. I think that's what's super magical. All sequences are magical, and so is the judge. Of course, I won't try to change your wishes. The lawyer potion formula is not uncommon in Backlund, and I happen to have a collection. Unfortunately, I only have low-order formulas, so you have to be prepared." "Okay, Uncle Cole." Grelint nodded quickly. He believed that the Golden List could completely solve the problem of the formula of the low and medium sequence potions. Joffrey nodded and walked in and motioned for Grelint to follow. There is also a compartment behind the tiered bookshelf, where there are several shelves. On the shelf on the left are some strange materials, such as some animal bones, herbs of various colors, tubers of unknown plants, and some leaves. They are spaced apart from each other and placed regularly. On the front are some chemical utensils such as beakers and test tubes, and on the right are several shaped items, most of which are accessories and others. Grelint guessed that these were all magical items with various abilities. 7. Grelint secretly counted them. It is obvious that Geoffrey Cole, who is backed by big nobles and top rich people, cannot be poor, and these 7 magical items are proof. Mysterious items are items that are processed by craftsmen, and the side effects are relatively easy to accept, and their value is often higher than the pure extraordinary characteristics. Lawyer Potion Formula. The main ingredients are a pair of black scale viper's eyes, a 9-segment grass. The auxiliary ingredients are 11 poplar leaves, 7 blood rose petals, and 14 drops of moonshine grass juice. 80 milliliters of pure water. As Geoffrey Cole spoke, he took the materials and showed them to Grelint one by one. Low-order materials are easy to preserve, and potions are easier to prepare. As long as the materials are used strictly according to the recipe, there will be no problem. After taking the ingredients, Geoffrey took a large beaker to prepare. This made Grelint, who was trying to see the potion stewed in an iron pot, quite disappointed. The beaker had its own scale. Geoffrey poured out an appropriate amount of prepared pure water, added 14 drops of light grey moonshine sap, and then added poplar leaves and rose petals. Grelint found that there was no change in the cup of liquid. Obviously the auxiliary material was insoluble in water. But when Geoffrey put the two main materials in one by one, the 4 solid materials began to dissolve rapidly and blended with each other. The finished product is a cup of light purple clear liquid, slightly thick. Drink it, the lawyer potion. Grelint didn't dare to delay any longer, took the potion and drank it in one gulp. Like the original book, the potion is a whole, and there is no residue at the bottom of the cup. When a lump entered his stomach, he felt that the taste of this thing was like jelly, and the taste was slightly bitter and quite exciting. The cool potion slid into the esophagus as a whole, absorbing a considerable amount of heat. Grelint gradually felt cold in his esophagus, his head began to ache, and his thinking was sluggish. In my head, there are many pictures of mausoleums. They are different from each other, but all of them are strange in style, awkward in decoration, and difficult to identify clearly. Eyes, ears, nose, all the senses suddenly failed, suddenly restored, and became very sensitive. The colors seen by the eyes became brighter and more distinct, the sounds heard by the ears seemed to be amplified, and even breathing could be heard. The nose was also sensitive, and the smell of the material that could have been tolerated made him almost vomit. And then these senses are again disabled and sensitive again. After going back and forth 7 or 8 times, all the senses finally returned to normal, and Grelint Ming found that his senses were much more sensitive and his thinking was much more active. He became a lawyer. Lawyer is good at finding and exploiting loopholes in the rules and weaknesses of opponents. He has excellent eloquence and speculative logic. How does it feel? Grelint. Geoffrey said in textbook style. I'm fine, Uncle Cole. That's good. The lawyer's improvement in spirituality is relatively small, and the main purpose is to strengthen the body's perception of the material world. Of course, you still need to learn meditation and vision. Come, do as I say. The spiritual vision method taught by Geoffrey is basically the same as the original work. This part of Grelint is quite easy to complete, and spiritual vision is also a major method for lawyers to observe loopholes. The difference from the original book is that Grelint's spiritual vision consumes more spirituality, and the observation is clearer and more detailed. And meditation is very difficult, even lying down, after soothing. Grelint also spent a lot of effort. He guessed that it was just because of lack of spirituality. Fortunately, it was a success in the end. If you choose to be a secret spy like me, you should learn all kinds of occult knowledge and ritual magic next. Unfortunately, lawyers are not good at ritual magic, and it is difficult to learn various spells. Perhaps you should learn more about the laws of the kingdom? I don't really know how to master the power of this sequence of potions. Of course, some basic esoteric knowledge is something you should master. For example, various languages that leverage natural forces, such as the representation of some symbols and materials. Can you come to study 3 times a week? Grelint. Geoffrey suddenly stopped talking and arranged the future study tasks. Of course, Uncle Cole. Grelint unexpectedly heard Geoffrey claiming to be the sequence of secret peeps, and guessed that he should be the Sequence 6 Professor Scroll or the Sequence 5 Astrologer. Grelint basically remembers the knowledge about the names of the various sequences, because he is very interested in it. As for the knowledge of occultism and the history of the original work, he basically has no impression. Because Your Excellency the Count's schedule is uncertain, I can't give you a definite study time. You can only let the servant inform you one day in advance. If your schedule is not a problem, you can decide to study the course the next day. Besides, the superhuman world is very dangerous, and in low sequences, the lethality of guns is unparalleled. My suggestion is that you can practice your shooting skills more. Even in the middle sequence, guns are quite threatening. One more thing, Grelint, doing something that matches the name of the potion will help you master the potion. You need to try more. Grelint nodded in approval, and marked it down. In fact, he knew that the last point should be acting and digesting instead of mastering. Unfortunately, he has no reason to explain this problem. Joffrey should be an unofficial wild beyonder. Besides, I want to give you a magical item. Mysterious item. Grelint pretended not to understand. Mysterious items with various extraordinary abilities, their extraordinary abilities originate from specific extraordinary characteristics. After the superhumans die, the potion in their bodies will not disappear out of thin air, but will slowly precipitate out. We make this precipitated, pure substance an extraordinary characteristic, it is the essence of all extraordinary abilities. These beyonder characteristics will instinctively attach to objects, forming various powerful and dangerous sealed items. They can also be made into various magical items by artisans. Joffrey spoke slowly and evenly, explaining each detail to Grelint. This item originally belonged to you. He is your father's relic. Judge. The magical item corresponding to Sequence 6. Grelint was excited in his heart, and his expression became even more heavy and sad. Your father is the extraordinary of the Arbiter sequence, the judge of Sequence 6. He is a real judge. Originally, we thought that you would not become an extraordinary because of the obstruction of me and Your Excellency the Earl. In order to prevent extraordinary characteristics from automatically attaching to objects to form a terrifying sealed item, the Earl entrusted me to find someone to make him into a magical item. It's a very good magical item. Joffrey's expression darkened and he sighed sincerely. He removed the shelf in front of Grelint, groped on the wall, found a movable wooden board, pressed one end of the wooden board, and the other end naturally popped out, bringing out a small box the size of a palm. Grelint took the box and opened it gently. What he saw was a silver white ring. It had a simple and ancient pattern, giving it a heavy and solemn texture. It has two active extraordinary abilities, one is spiritual piercing, which is a means of directly attacking the spiritual body. The second is prohibition, you can use ancient Hermes language to formulate rules that prohibit certain behaviors and extraordinary abilities, and force all people within a certain range to obey. Besides, it usually makes you more dignified and improves your fighting skills by a small amount. The side effect of it is that whenever a certain rule is made, the wearer of the ring is doubled. You can give it a name. It is indeed a very excellent magical item, and the side effects are equivalent to non-existence, because the prohibition rule you make must be the extraordinary ability of your opponent, and it has almost no effect if you are constrained twice. The Ring of Law, what do you think? Grelint was quite excited that this item was strong enough and safe. Well, at least you didn't call it a forbidden ring. Joffrey nodded in approval, while Grelint's mouth stiffened slightly. Let's come here first today. You can first familiarize yourself with your extraordinary abilities and the Ring of Law. Tomorrow, His Excellency the Earl has a more important banquet. I can't arrange your study. I'll wait for the servant to tell you later. Okay, Uncle Cole. Just after leaving the basement, Grelint wanted to find the time to say goodbye to Hibbert and leave. Grelint saw Hibbert coming over. I heard from your father that you became a beyonder. Grelint is a little strange about this. Isn't Earl Hall's attitude always that he does not want his children to become Beyonders? Why did you tell Hibbert directly this time? Yes, I became a lawyer in an extraordinary sense. Uncle Hall took the initiative to tell you. Grelent raised the volume on the word active to show confusion. Yes. I have a friend who might need your help. Brother, your friend is almost equal to yourself with us. If you need it, I'm very happy. But Hibbert, I have to tell you that I'm just a superhuman who has just started, and I don't even know the laws of the kingdom at all. Maybe I can't help you. Grelent declined. In fact, he himself is very willing to help, because the core of potion is acting. But obviously Hibbert's financial resources can hire enough good defense lawyers. If there is nothing this fine lawyer can do, he doesn't think he can make a difference. And he wasn't sure if a failed play would bring bad results. No, Grelent, I think you must have misunderstood something. My father asked me to find you. I asked my father about a reliable lawyer, and he recommended one to me, and told me that I could let you sit in as a paralegal, and maybe there would be some unexpected surprises. It doesn't matter if it's not the main debate. I can absolutely not speak if I'm in the audience, unless I use my extraordinary ability to find some loopholes in the opponent's debate. Grelent pondered for a while, and immediately decided to agree. Such an opportunity can be said to be quite rare. Even for a nobleman, it is not easy for Grelent to play the role of a lawyer. Because clients with real interests will not choose a defense lawyer who is completely inexperienced, which is tantamount to courting death. Generally speaking, most people recognize nobles as high status and enviable wealth, but usually do not recognize their professional ability. Although it is true that it is. It turns out that, Hibbert, please thank the Count for me. Praise the goddess, this is what I hope, maybe I can use this to understand this profession more accurately. Grelent sincerely tapped his chest 4 times, forming a crimson moon. It can only be said that it is fortunate that he has muscle memory, otherwise it would be difficult for Grelent to imagine what he would be like. Okay, then it's settled. I'll tell the lawyer to visit you on Monday morning to review the case. The official court date is Wednesday. You look tired? Grelent. Indeed, this is not from physical fatigue, but from mental fatigue. Grelent guessed that the possible reason was that taking the potion had a great pressure on the spirit. In addition, his extremely sensitive senses made it a little difficult for him to get used to it. It's true, maybe it's just a temporary lack of habit. Grelent changed his left hand to the cane, raised his hand and pressed his eyebrows. Perhaps you need to rest here? Go home after lunch. Thank you for your kindness, Hibbert, but now I just want to go home and have a good sleep. I'm sorry to Audrey for me, and I hope to share the magic of extraordinary power with her next time. Of course, this is just a pretext. Grelent is actually looking for a shooting club today, preferably one that can learn to fight by the way. Well, if you insist on leaving. Goodbye then, Grelent. Goodbye, Hibbert. As an idle nobleman, Grelent is no stranger to guns. Although there is no strict gun certification, he has also practiced revolver shooting many times. But that kind of practice seems more accurate to describe it as play. By the way, it is also necessary to apply for a license for all types of weapons by the way. Well, some shooting clubs should have such channels. Go to the shooting and fighting club closest to home. Mel. Leaving the Earl's mansion, Grelent instructed his coachman Meldau. Okay, Mr. Mariano. Queen's is quite good in terms of public security and hygiene, and it does not have the garbage and even excrement that Grelent imagined in Europe in the Middle Ages. There is still quite a bit of time before lunch, and Grelent hopes to sign up for the club in the morning and hurry home to rest. He is indeed extremely tired. Is this a situation unique to the lawyer's route? The original book doesn't seem to have that new sequence 9, right? Joffrey didn't mention anything similar. Veteran Officer Shooting Fighting Club. Grelent walked into the hall while meditating on the plain and straightforward name of the club. At the front desk was a beautiful lady with brown hair in a formal suit. She glanced at Grelint and the footman Hash. "Good noon, sir, what do you need?" "I want to practice shooting and learn some fighting skills at the same time, ma'am. As for the handling of all types of weapons, this is obviously not the business scope that a club front desk should have." "No problem, sir. We have two services here. One is to become a student of the club. You can choose professional teachers as teachers according to different fees. Of course, shooting and fighting need to be registered separately. The second option is to join as a coach. You can freely designate any person to be a teacher, and if you have a knighthood, you can apply for a certificate of legal possession of weapons accordingly. Whichever you choose, you can enjoy the free firearms and fighting equipment provided by the club, as well as bathing facilities, lunch, and afternoon tea." "Well, I take back the idea just now. It turns out that many aristocrats have used this kind of practice to practice shooting to apply for a gun certificate. Okay, I choose the second one and join as a coach." Grelint didn't ask any further questions, nodded and smiled. "It's our honor." The brown-haired lady smiled and nodded happily. "When you become a member coach for the first time, you need to pay a one-time annual fee of £80, and then it will be £12 per year." Grelint nodded and motioned for Hash to count the £70 note. "Whether it is guns or fighting equipment, relatively speaking, there will be a certain amount of wear and tear. Therefore, the annual fee will be higher than the average social club. This does not include the cost of consuming bullets. The club only provides free guns. If there is a lot of practice, the price of this part is not cheap." After checking the anti-counterfeiting watermark, she put away the banknotes and took out a form. "You fill in the basic information. I need to use this to open payment receipts and register member information." Grelint picked up the pen and filled it out. "Okay, Mr. Mariano. I'm Rushmi Bilal, your industrious servant. Please sit down for a while. The production of the unique membership badge is time-consuming, which may take more than 10 minutes. As for the certificate of legal possession of weapons, UUGanshu www.uuganshu.com. This requires you to fill in a written application and hand it over to you for your designation. A shooting instructor is just fine. Do you want tea or coffee?" "Your Excellency. Black tea, thank you." For Hash, Grelint didn't specifically choose coffee to avoid revealing the filling. It's reasonable to change the flavor occasionally, isn't it? With the marquee black tea, Grelint picked up the Backlund Daily on the table. The air pollution in Backlund is getting worse and worse. The newspaper listed a series of tragic cases of illness and death caused by air pollution, and called on the upper house to introduce laws to deal with it. Grain prices continue to rise, hoping to repeal the Grain Act. There was a gas explosion in the East District, 6 people were killed, and no one was injured. This is a beyonder battle, right? The gas explosion shouldn't cause only the dead but not the injured. Grelint questioned silently. After half an hour, the special badge and membership card were made. This is a gold badge with a micro-engraved revolver and dagger on the front, and a debossed pattern on the edge. The shading on the back is the coat of arms symbolizing the Viscount, and the upper layer is his full name. Due to the rapid development of society and the rise of a large number of ordinary rich people, the old-fashioned way of showing identity is actually very rare now, and Grelint can only barely identify it. The membership card is a hardcover, which contains detailed personal information, the benefits that can be enjoyed, the price of various additional consumption and so on. These include, but are not limited to, borrowing a club kitchen, buying bullets, buying sports-friendly clothing, and more. It can be said that the service is quite perfect. Of course, the price is not friendly either. The feeling of exhaustion is getting heavier and heavier. Grelint did not insist on getting familiar with the club in advance, nor did he determine the fighting and shooting coach in advance. Instead, he chose to go home in time to rest. "Hash, I want to take a break and don't have to prepare lunch before I wake up. Okay, Mr. Mariano. Harsh nodded, hesitantly. Do you need the help of a personal doctor? Krillin was obviously tired quickly when he came out of the Earl's house, and the servant Hash was a little worried about this. No, the doctor can't help me, maybe the pharmacist can. Krillin muttered to himself. No, I probably know why. With a wave of his hand, Krillin vetoed the proposal in a deep voice, washed briefly, and fell asleep. This is not the normal situation of becoming an extraordinary. With an indescribable strange wave passed to Krillin, he woke up from his deep sleep. What does it feel like? Neither like the sound nor the strange fluctuations of the image. Slowly, his eyes began to recover, and Krillin sees all kinds of brilliant colors, surrounded by filaments of light that are on and off. Some of them are dark purple, some are light red, some are green, some are brown, some are light blue, some are crimson. Various colors change rapidly, like a visual feast. Such color changes are very rapid. The last moment, Krillin felt very abrupt, awkward, and quite uncomfortable. The next moment, he felt that although the colors changed rapidly, they were very natural, and the interweaving of various colors was also very harmonious. Two completely different feelings alternated strangely in his body, but Krillin did not have the slightest abnormality. It seemed that the two continued normally at different times. Bowing his head to look, he himself became one of the countless filaments of light, changing in color, on and off. A perfect demonstration of what is called colorful black and colorful white. Slowly, his ear also began to recover, and various invisible and strange ripples were introduced into the ear, forming hearing, which seemed to be various magical sound waves. He heard the old man's admonition, his voice like a baby, the girl's murmur, the voice of a big man, the idiot was talking about wisdom, the lunatic was explaining logic, there was also an eagle roaring in the deep sea, and a baboon talking in the parliament. All kinds of fluctuations passed over, and he recognized them from hearing. They were harmonious and natural, harmonious and wonderful. Slowly, the light filament where it is located seems to be extra heavy due to the existence of self. He began to absorb other filaments of light, but unfortunately, they did not blend with each other, they sucked in and floated out like floating clouds. However, attraction exists. These filaments gradually gathered, and then repelled each other, but finally got closer to each other. In addition to the seen light threads, the heard fluctuations are also clearer, more absurd and natural. Suddenly, the confused Krillin suddenly woke up, and instinctively rushed towards the nearest ray of light. What is that? Krillin woke up completely, stood up and sat up, only to find that cold sweat soaked a large part of his shirt. His mind was unprecedentedly clear, his spirituality had obviously grown by a large margin, his stomach was empty, and he felt a little colicky from hunger. Krillin looked at himself silently. Your Excellency! Harsh, disturbed by his movement, knocked on the door and asked softly tentatively. What time is it? Hash. It's already dusk, 6:26, sir. He resumed his calm and natural voice, and no longer deliberately lowered it. To prepare dinner, I want to eat a pound of Beilang Heights steak. Also, I want to take a bath immediately after dinner. Krillin's slightly exaggerated voice was very clear, which completely reassured Hash. Okay, Your Excellency. Your will is our will. The chef has prepared the half-cooked meat in advance, and you can have dinner in no time, sir. After enjoying dinner comfortably and taking a bath, Krillin felt that he was about to be completely corrupted by capital and feudalism. Because he slept too comfortably in the afternoon and was quite full for dinner, Krillin didn't need to sleep at all at this moment, but turned away the servant and experienced the magic of extraordinary powers. Unfortunately, Krillin's aristocratic education only involved Ruan, Intis, Fisak, and Old Fisak in linguistics. It does not involve the languages of Hermes, ancient Hermes, dragons, and elves that leverage the power of nature. Therefore, he has no way of experimenting with the forbidden ability of the Ring of Law. As for spiritual piercing, it can only be used on living things, and there is no experimental object. What kind of extraordinary things do those light threads seem to be in those dreams? And it should be an extraordinary thing in this sequence or an adjacent sequence, otherwise I have a high probability of going crazy now. Grelint was convinced that he had finally captured a filament of light. This is because Grelint obviously felt that his ability to find loopholes in the rules was about doubled without digesting the potion at all. There is no real basis for this, just a magical, instinctive intuition. From the perspective of enhancing the ability of this sequence, Grelint reasonably speculates that it should be a high sequence extraordinary characteristic, and those remaining filaments are the extraordinary characteristics of other levels. In addition, Grelint probably understood why he could think about the starry sky unscrupulously. This is because he himself has become a filament of light. That is to say, in theory, he himself is already the person of the sequence level where the light filament is located. This is different from Klein. Although Origin Castle has a very high status, it was not really related to Clear at the beginning and became a whole. Therefore, Kain itself did not have a high-ranking personality in the early stage, and UU reading www.uuganshu.com could only use the source castle to pretend. What I don't know is my own origin. It seems that none of the bigwigs involved in the original book have such abilities. As for the composition of the filament, Grelint has 4 guesses. Since it can block the pollution from the starry sky, the beyonder characteristics corresponding to those filaments should be at least not lower than sequence 2. And the corresponding characteristics and uniqueness of the Prince Execution or the Dark Emperor should now be complete in the hands of Adam or Chiao San, and there will be no omissions. And the uniqueness corresponding to the Judge is the Brass Book. Then there may be only 4 remaining, the characteristics of the Duke of Entropy, the Balancer, the Hand of Order, or part of the Kingdom of Disorder. Of course, there is also a great possibility that they are only part of them and not complete. In order to directly enhance the ability to find loopholes, Grelint guessed that there is a high probability that it is not the Balancer or the Hand of Order, and the Arbiter sequence hates the behavior of using rules. There is a certain possibility that it is part of the Kingdom of Originium Disorder. Part of the reason for the guess is that Grelint remembered that the boss had sealed it in the Western continent. However, that thing seems to be torn, there are some here, and it was also broken by the outer god, which further contaminates the Brass Book. So Grelint is almost certain that his characteristic is the Duke of Entropy or a part of it. Because if it's the part of the source material left behind, I've probably already taken the shape of an outer god. Of course, there is also an unreliable guess, the big guy is too fierce, that thing was not only split into 2 parts, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, and even some missing corners and corners. Anyway, it is also a source quality, corresponding to the old level, so it won't be so shameless. Grelint was quite satisfied with the outcome that he guessed was the most likely. Directly accommodate or even become sequence 2 without losing control, although it is not fully mastered, it needs a little absorption. But that was quite lucky. On the one hand, you can ensure that you have the opportunity to know all the knowledge without being polluted, and on the other hand, you can directly strengthen the sequence ability, just like a plugin. No, it should be said that this is a plugin. Isn't this the invincible in the same realm unique to the protagonist? However, in his heart, Grelint actually recognizes the role that IQ plays in combat when the sequence difference is very small. After tossing until the early morning, Grelint finally felt sleepy again, so he fell asleep comfortably. The next Sunday was another day for the idle nobles to waste their time. Of course, the premise is that no one disturbs you. Originally, Grelint's plan today was to spend the whole day in the club, practicing shooting in the morning and fighting in the afternoon. In the absence of survival pressure, there is no need to consider the needs of work. It is very happy to learn a certain skill out of hobby. Unfortunately, an uninvited guest came early in the morning. Do I look like a second fool? Grelint looked at the man in his 30s with puzzled eyes and questioned silently. Your Excellency Mariano, please believe me, I have a great invention project. With only a small investment, you can enjoy huge returns. The inventor's sweat glands secrete quickly, his speech is very fast, his words are contagious, and he is quite aggrieved, as if he has suffered some kind of injustice. This gentleman has black hair and brown eyes, and his eyebrows are somewhat oriental. He was wearing a draped blue and white work uniform, slightly taller than Grelint, and of average slender build. Yes, I believe you, Mr. Inventor. But I think you should at least introduce yourself to me first. At the same time, tell us about your work, and why you are so confident in what it will achieve. And, why did you find me and not someone else? Grelint's tone was steady, and he asked questions like the self-proclaimed inventor. The black-haired youth picked up the Marquis black tea, took a quick sip, took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, Your Excellency Viscount, please forgive my rudeness just now. Let's get to know him formally. My name is Sylvie Heisenberg, a well-known inventor currently living at 78 7th Avenue in Hillston District. You can send someone to inquire." He increased the volume on the word famous. In this regard, Grelint is actually not puzzled. This is something that is easy to verify, and the other party will not tell lies about it. The reason for finding you is that the investment I registered in the newspaper last week was approved by your estate agent Anthony Stewart. Since I now need a larger cash investment that he has no authority to dispose of, he asked me to visit you. Anthony Stewart was indeed his estate agent, in charge of investments in the shipping industry. Grelint searched hard in his memory to confirm that there was indeed such a thing. The day before yesterday, Anthony's letter did mention this. But he didn't specify when the inventor would visit, so Grelint didn't make a schedule. Anthony's letter stated that the inventor had theoretically improved the structure of the steam engine of a small ship, and that still water simulations showed that the new steam engine could guarantee the same voyage under the condition of saving 8% of the raw material burning. The downside is that the machine is 12% more expensive. And Anthony expressed quite certainty about this, suggesting that Grelint can participate in the investment. The result of Anthony's analysis is that the limit of this investment is that Grelint can invest £4,000, occupying 49% of the shares, and the other party uses technology to invest 51% of the shares to achieve control. But in fact, Grelint has no specific concept at all, and can only choose to believe in authority. Anthony is a veteran estate agent left by his father Lawrence. At the same time, since Grelint does not understand these things, he has always been directly responsible to Earl Hall, so he is completely credible. I remembered, Anthony did tell me about it. He told me that you are a real genius inventor. Once this work of yours is successfully researched, it will earn an annual profit of no less than £50,000. Grelint affirmed his words and highly praised his plan to improve the new steam engine for small ships. Sylvie Heisenberg didn't interject, but just smiled, showing his frankness. I'm very interested in this, but I don't know how you think about the allocation of equity and the required capital investment. Considering that you have just become an extraordinary, you may need some cash to buy materials and formulas. And Grelint does not have much money to pursue, so he is not very willing to spend too much cash on investment. However, directly rejecting a possible get-rich opportunity does not conform to normal logic. For a nobleman with an annual income of £20,000, doubling his income can be called a sudden wealth. At the same time, he thinks that there is something quite wrong with the inventor of Sylvie Heisenberg. The image of his obsession with inventions and his lack of understanding of the world does not match his later cultivation of me and Marquis black tea. If he really doesn't like drinking tea, then an inventor who really doesn't understand the world will probably ignore it directly. If he likes black tea, then as a middle-class inventor with average income, he will not be so disdainful of high-end Marquis black tea. Kanshu www.uuganshu.com. This cannot be explained by politeness, which does not conform to the character setting of doesn't understand the world. Also, whether it is the character design of the other party in the early stage, or deliberately asking him to go to Hillston District to confirm, and pulling Anthony as evidence, it seems a bit deliberate. Finally, and most doubtful, is, as an inventor who loves invention, he did not take the initiative to mention his research results throughout the process. And when Grelint mentioned and highly affirmed the research results, he didn't have any pride. It's not like I'm confident enough, but like I don't understand it, and I'm afraid that the more you say, the more wrong you will be. He is a liar. It is very likely that he pretended to be Sylvie Heisenberg to defraud. These analyses are the result of the ability to find loopholes that lawyers brought to Grelint, which ordinary liars cannot guard against. Unless the other party is a fraudster, which Grelint thinks is impossible. A Sequence 8 swindler is not someone who has just become an extraordinary lawyer to discover logical loopholes so easily. Maybe I can dismantle him with strict logical analysis? This must be good for my acting. Grelint was a little moved by this. Of course, this requires further testing to confirm. £4,000, sir, I need £4,000 in cash. You can hold 40% of the shares accordingly. Very reasonable distribution, Mr. Heisenberg. But I want more shares. I'd like to invest £6,000 at a time for 51% of the shares. What do you think? To exchange an additional investment of nearly £1,000 for a controlling stake, this is Grelint's temptation. Sylvie Heisenberg was quite moved by this, but he still tried to bargain. Your Excellency Viscount, with another £500, I can let you take control. Logical, but not human. Grelint judged silently, shook his head in rejection, and replied in a deep voice, "This is my bottom line, Mr. Heisenberg. I want you to know that this is still a study that has not really been successful. Excessive greed will not lead to cooperation, and if your sincerity goes beyond that, I think there is no need to continue negotiations." Sure enough, it's the face of a noble who eats people and doesn't spit out bones. The party who pays the money can so arrogantly lower the price and grab the wealth. Sylvie sighed silently. Your Excellency, your sincerity makes me regret my greed. The deal, £6,000, 51% of the shares. My only requirement is that you can pay all the money in one lump sum after signing the contract. I hope to sign an investment contract with you as soon as possible, what do you think? He agreed. And he asked for a one-time payment of investment funds. This seems to be an additional request for an unsuccessful price increase, but Grelint just determined that the other party was a liar who planned to make a fortune and ran away. No problem, Mr. Heisenberg. Grelint agreed. Before Sylvie had time to be happy, he heard the other party add, "Of course, before that, I need you to explain the specific parameters of this steam engine and the principle of improvement. To be honest, although I am a loyal believer of the goddess, I am also fully curious and concerned about the magical steam engine." Grelint was talking nonsense in a serious manner, and the smile on his face gradually became playful. "I believe in you. Grandmas, doesn't it mean that this is a waste aristocrat who is completely incompetent? Where did it go wrong? If I hadn't inquired beforehand that you are an idiot noble who has no interest in mechanical knowledge at all, how could I have come directly to the door without knowing anything about it?" Sylvie cursed inwardly, her face gradually stiffened, and she forced a smile on her face. "Your Excellency, the steam engine is a relatively complicated thing. If you are really interested in it, I suggest you start with relatively simple levers and pulleys. It's getting late today. I can't explain such a complicated thing to you quickly and clearly. Maybe I can visit you another day, so I won't bother you for now." Said, without waiting for Grelint to refuse, he turned around and wanted to leave. He was sure that if he was really exposed, he would not be able to get any benefits from being surrounded by many servants of the other party. And he wouldn't naively hope that the other party didn't actually find out what he was doing. "Please wait a moment, Mr. Liar. If you don't want me to shout so loudly that you are stopped by my servants when you go out." Grelint threatened. Although he successfully exploited the loopholes in Sylvie's words and behaviors to decipher the other party, and gained some feedback and digested a bit of magic medicine. But he did not use language analysis to refute the other party, so he could not well reflect the art of lawyer. To put it simply, I have to be like a villain, explaining the advantages of my brain after the confrontation and victory. The fake Sylvie suddenly stopped in his footsteps, turned around and stared at Grelint, with a hint of madness in his pupils. What do you want to do? Your Excellency. Grelint was secretly vigilant, and his thumb secretly rubbed the law ring to prevent the opponent from jumping over the wall. Although he has become a beyonder and benefited from the ring of law to gain a certain fighting ability, a well-trained gangster can definitely take him down in a heat-and fight without injury. Correct your flaws, sir. Grelint let out a good mouthful of white teeth, and his tone was extremely weak. Sylvie snorted disdainfully and did not move for a while. Seeing that the other party had no intention of doing something for the time being, Grelint secretly breathed a sigh of relief. First, Mr. Sylvie, although your work clothes are deliberately wrinkled, there is no damage or oil stains. You probably don't know that steam engines use lubricating oil. Grelint chuckled softly, full of sarcasm. If you came here subconsciously wearing a work uniform, you probably wouldn't choose a clean one on purpose. If you care about your image and don't want your investment to fail, you should at least change into cheap formal clothes. The only explanation is that you want to reinforce your image as an inventor, but you don't know much about it. Sylvie's face gradually became gloomy, and he snorted again without refuting. And Grelint obviously felt a little more relaxed, and the potion digested a little bit, so he became more and more excited. Second, you call yourself an inventor, but you don't give a half-sentence description of your achievements. Perhaps a qualified fraudster also has adequate preparations. Seeing the other party's face getting gloomier, Grelint became more alert. The first. Before the word 3 could be said, he saw that the other party's eyes suddenly became cold, a dagger appeared in his hand at some point, and he rushed towards him at an unbelievable speed. Sylvie was very sensitive, so scared that Grelint instinctively dodged sideways. Because the distance between the two sides is too far, Grelint, who has the fighting bonus of the Ring of Law, easily avoided the opponent's thrusts by sideways. However, Sylvie suddenly turned his wrist and stabbed Grelint's abdomen with extraordinary agility. He didn't have time to react. The thief, hand of agility. He is an extraordinary man. Mental piercing. Grelint used his only attacking skill in time. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Sylvie suddenly saw two silver-white rays of light shoot out from the other's brown pupils, shining into his own eyes. The stinging pain like a sudden explosion in the brain, as if it was about to split, blood oozes out from the nostrils, ears, and eyes, blurring the vision. Due to a headache, his attack missed the target. Then, Grelint felt a chill in his leg, and the delicate dagger slashed his trousers diagonally from the outside, almost making a cut in his leg. This is a swindler who used mental interference to create hallucinations, pretending to attack the lower abdomen, but in fact attacking the thigh. Extraordinary. A thought appeared in Sylvie's mind, followed by a strong sense of remorse and a bad feeling. In order to hold the opponent hostage so that he can leave smoothly, he pretended to attack Grelint's lower abdomen, but in fact he just stabbed him in the thigh, hoping to make him lose his combat power but not let him die. Seeing the effect of mental piercing, Grelint didn't have time to think about why the dagger that pierced his lower abdomen scratched his thigh. The instinctual punch slammed into the enemy's heart with all his strength, causing the opponent to retreat several steps in a row. Sylvie, who had blurred vision, aching head, and confused thinking, didn't know the enemy's means, so he didn't dare to entangle too much, and immediately turned around and jumped out of the window to force his way. Here is the height of the 4th floor. Before Grelint had time to speak, there was a dull crashing sound from outside. He ran to the window and saw that Sylvie landed hidden, twitched a few times, and gradually lost his voice. Grelint's villa is surrounded by walls, and others can't see the scene inside. In fact, the ground on the right side and the back side of the villa is not flush with the ground outside the wall, but flush with the foundation of the two-story basement. He may just remember that this is the second floor. Grelint was speechless for a long time. It's not even manslaughter, he jumped off the building himself. Why can't he think about it like that? Really? Inevitably, I was very panicked inside, quite uneasy. He chose to defend himself inwardly, and at the same time relieved the pressure by complaining. As a traveler in a peaceful era, even if Grelint usually thinks he is brave enough, he is really frightened now. After a while, Grelint was awakened by the pain in his leg. Looking down, the small opening had stopped bleeding, and the dried blood had condensed into a scab. On the slightly deformed corpse downstairs, a little bit of transparent light appeared, attracting each other and forming a ball. He quickly calmed down and thought about what to do. The police cannot be allowed to discover beyonder characteristics, even if they probably don't know it. Define him as an ordinary liar to avoid attracting the attention of the Nighthawks. Call the police after half an hour to ensure that even if the police find a problem, it will take more than an hour to tell the night watchman directly. Exceeds the optimal channeling time. Grelint pondered to himself, combing through possible loopholes one by one. Then, he quietly touched downstairs and picked up the group of beyonder characteristics. And the exquisite dagger was found from the corpse. Spiritual intuition told him that it was a magical item. Apart from these two items, there is nothing extraordinary about Sylvie. However, the handling of these two items really made Grelint quite embarrassed. The dagger was actually fine, but Grelint threw it into the drainage hole in the south corner of the villa. When he is free, he can take it back at any time. However, as for beyonder characteristics, he didn't dare to put them in random places. It would be bad if he was accidentally eaten by some animal. Ordinary animals have a high probability of being unable to directly withstand the power of Sequence 8 extraordinary characteristics. If they eat it, they will go crazy. This is quite dangerous. But he can't carry it with him either, in case this Sylvie has a criminal record, which leads to the Nighthawk. Grelint, who carries the extraordinary characteristics, will be completely exposed to the eyes of the official extraordinary. Even if they won't do drastic actions to a noble, they will at least be included in the monitoring list. After thinking for a while, it's almost half an hour. Grelint didn't dare to hesitate any longer. He looked around in the basement and saw a heavy and thick wooden box. His eyes lit up. It was decided that it was you. At least the power of a mouse or cat can't lift the lid, and bigger animals can't get into the room at all. Going back upstairs quickly, Grelint pretended to wake up from a coma. A shout came out. Someone, go and call the police. Mr. Mariano, are you sure your testimony is completely true and reliable? I have to remind you that if there are any serious consequences because of your false testimony, according to the law, you will be severely punished. Angela is an experienced senior inspector at the Siveras field. Her brows are slightly white, her cheeks are skinny, and her nasolabial lines are very obvious. She looks to be in her 50s. Half an hour ago, his subordinates reported that there was a murder in the house of the newly promoted Viscount Grelint Mariano, and the deceased was suspected to be the perpetrator of many thefts, the fast-handed thief Quinn. What do you mean? This experienced thief who has never missed a beat came to your house disguised as an inventor Sylvie to try to deceive him. He accidentally jumped off the building and died while fleeing after you saw it through. His tone seemed to say that he saw a mouse biting a dog today. If Quinn's direct cause of death was indeed a fall, Angela would have directly announced the arrest of Grelint. It is difficult to explain the motives of the extraordinary to ordinary people. Grelint decided to keep his mouth shut. As a lawyer, he fully recognized the phrase "the more you say, the more wrong you are." ER's famous saying. I know it's unconvincing, but I think I've explained everything I know. In the name of the goddess, I'm not lying. If you continue to unreasonably induce me to speak and bear the guilt, I will sue in the name of the noble. Yes, the most surprising thing about the whole thing is that Quinn really died from falling to his death, and the traces left by his extraordinary ability mental piercing were completely covered by the traces of falling to his death. As for the marks left by the punch on the chest, Grelint admitted it frankly. Because this is only the strength of a normal adult man, and does not involve transcendence. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Quinn's death. According to various details, the forensic doctor has pointed out that Quinn was actively jumping off the building instead of being pushed down. The only doubt is that it took more than half an hour after Quinn's death that Grelint called the servants to call the police. How do you explain this, Mr. Mariano? I don't know about it. I fainted after he jumped out of the window. After waking up, I immediately called the police. In this part, Grelint could only pretend to be deaf and mute, and he didn't know anything about it. There is a certain risk that this will lead to inquiries from the Nighthawks, but Grelint is not particularly worried about it. The way to fight is to meditate, and then consciously enter the light threads in the dream, which can effectively fight against all kinds of living people in the middle and low sequences, dreaming, and even mind reading. However, the disadvantage is that it cannot last for too long, and the body outside is completely unprotected at this time, and can only be used to deal with official beyonders in preparation. And if you don't delay this half an hour, once Quinn is involved in some extraordinary case. If the official beyonder was directly channeled into his spirit, then Grelint would have no room for mediation, and could only hope for the kindness of the official beyonder. The intuition of years of investigating the case told Angela that even if all the evidence pointed to Quinn jumping from the building, the truth of the case must still be related to this Mr. Mariano. However, he did not intend to delve into it because of various considerations. First, Mr. Mariano was a nobleman, and the crime took place in the other party's home, and the other party to the conflict was a habitual thief. Generally speaking, it should not be that Grelint took the initiative to send out malicious intentions, and ordinary criminals would not choose to act in their own homes. Second, and the most important point, Quinn's direct cause of death had no obvious relationship with Grelint, and this was the core factor that Angela didn't think it was necessary to investigate. Okay, Mr. Mariano, we have no problem. Congratulations, we have preliminarily determined that you have no guilt, and the details need to be further verified. But you are a direct witness to the case, and we need you to take a record at the police station. In addition, before we close the case, if you don't want your freedom to be restricted, you need to pay £10 bail. If it is finally confirmed that you have no problem, you can get this bail back. It was another young inspector who was in charge of informing Grelint, who did not know his name. Inside the police station, Grelint was quite cooperative with the police's questions, which made the young inspector breathe a sigh of relief. Even if Grelint refused to cooperate, in the absence of evidence, it would be difficult for them to deal with a nobleman. If they were civilians, they would not hesitate to use intimidation, torture and other means. Don't think too much about the situation in any place, its essence is a violent law enforcement agency. Mr. Mariano, the last question, for the sake of your reputation, we think we can claim that the police shot and killed this criminal outside your villa. What do you think? He tentatively asked Grelint. Grelint was a little stunned, thought for a moment, and the corner of his mouth raised a slight arc. No problem, you have considered it quite well. After tossing to 3:20 in the afternoon, Grelint finally walked out of the police station. I haven't had lunch yet, he whispered to himself. There was not much food to eat in the morning, and Grelint had another fight with Quinn. Although he did not exercise much, the food seemed to be digested very quickly under the intense emotional ups and downs. So Grelint was so hungry right now that his chest was on his back. Forget it, let's go home and eat. It's not to save money, it's just that many restaurants don't provide service during non-dinner meal times that are not connected before and after. Grelint is not willing to ask them one by one like a fool. And to be honest, the chef Grelint hired was quite standard, and he prepared everyday food that surpassed the rather sophisticated-looking food found in many restaurants on the street. After swallowing the last mouthful of beef bone and vegetable soup, Grelint hiccuped in satisfaction, and then subconsciously looked around for a nobleman. This was quite an inelegant behavior. There is no one else by his side, even the valet will not keep looking at the master. When the master is resting at home, the valet is usually resting too. And the master's room will have a summon bell to ensure that the servant can be called at any time and enjoy the service. I want to sleep when I'm full. Grelint didn't even want to deal with the rapidly unstable factor, the extraordinary characteristics of a swindler, nor did he want to reflect on and sort out the process of the morning battle. He just wanted to get a good night's sleep. Boom, boom, boom. There was a knock on the door of the restaurant. Mr. Mariano, are you finished with your meal? Your Excellency Anthony is waiting for you in the parlor with Sylvie Heisenberg and the lawyers of both parties. May I ask if you have time to see them? Anthony is old and capable, and he is not directly responsible to Grelint, so his personal decision-making ability is very strong and somewhat bossy. It was inappropriate to bring it directly to the door without prior notice, but he didn't take it seriously. Grelint doesn't care about this, because the other party can help him earn £10,000 a year. Looking at Chiao San's face. Forget it, I still don't sleep, otherwise I'm too energetic at night and won't be able to sleep. Grelint sighed and said, you ask them to wait for a while, and I'll be there right away. Okay, sir. The real Sylvie Heisenberg was a thin man who was noticeably shorter than Grelint. Based on his height, which is slightly less than 180 centimeters, Grelint guessed that the other party was about 1.7 meters. He was wearing a formal suit slightly whitish from repeated starch washing, and he was holding a pipe in his left hand, looking to be in his 40s. His complexion is dark and yellow, his features are simple, and his hands are full of calluses. When Grelint arrived at the door, they were arguing about something. Excited, this simple gentleman stood up and tapped his pipe on the table, quite dissatisfied. It's impossible. If you speak seriously, then we don't have to talk anymore. Mr. Heisenberg, is there anything rude about my servant? Grelint spoke up at the right time to prevent the quarrel from expanding further. This simple gentleman suddenly saw a young man arriving, and quickly guessed that he was the owner of this villa, the youngest Viscount in Backlund, the legendary youngest Viscount Grelint Mariano. No, there is no such thing, Your Excellency. His expression was a little embarrassed, as if he was discovered by the client on the spot when he was talking about others behind his back. It's your agent, Anthony, his conditions are too harsh, I can't accept it. Oh? Is that so? So, which step have you already talked about? Gentlemen. Grelint asked aloud, walked into the reception room at the same time, saw Anthony on the right, nodded and greeted him. I think that's quite reasonable, Mr. Heisenberg. £6,000, 51% of the shares. Anthony emphasized again and told Grelint the offer. Ha ha! Hearing this set of quotations that were exactly the same as in the morning, Grelint laughed inwardly. Of course, he knew that this was a condition that Sylvie could not accept at all. If he is now allowed to hold more than 50 shares to achieve control, and after the success of subsequent product development, he can completely increase investment in assets and directly establish a company. In that case, Sylvie would have no chance to resist at all. He would be eaten to death by him, and it would not even be impossible for him to be kicked out directly. The reverse is different. Even if Sylvie can hold more than 50 shares now, when he actually sets up a company to build a production line later, he has to introduce third-party assets due to lack of funds, so as to achieve a relative balance. Do you think so too? Your Excellency? If so, then we don't have to waste each other's time. Sylvie's expression was stiff, and he was about to leave. In fact, Grelint does not really want to invest, but he suddenly had an idea. He turned to ask abruptly, I take the liberty to ask, what is your belief? Sylvie didn't know why, and even Anthony was very confused and couldn't understand why he asked this. Could it be that you want to see preferential treatment for the sake of faith? God of steam and machinery, Your Excellency. Sylvie sincerely drew a triangle on his chest. Krillin was non-committal. No longer talking deeply, but deliberately showing a cold tone. Unfortunately, my belief is the goddess of the night. What about your psychological price? Mr. Heisenberg. 45%, I can accept the investment of so many shares at most. This is my bottom line. As for the price, I think £4,000 is quite reasonable for each other. This has already achieved Anthony's expected result, but he thinks it can be lowered further. Or put some additional conditions. If the holding cannot be achieved, then I think the benefits and risks of this investment are not well matched. Mr. Heisenberg. What's your opinion, Krillin? I think it's already very suitable, people can't go too far. Indeed. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. Krillin echoed. Sylvie's face was even more ugly, but he was not in a hurry to really report his bottom line. His bottom line is £4,000, 49% of the shares. But he just suddenly realized that the other party didn't pay much attention to the few percent of the shares, but hoped for high risk and high return. Either low return, ultra low risk. Or I can receive the investment according to the research progress. He tried to ask. Anthony immediately made the decision, deal. Such an investment cannot be said to be completely risk-free for Greering, but it is indeed quite low. If the one-time investment fails, he will be wiped out against £4,000. Giving investment funds according to the progress in this way means that the product either fails in development and he loses the previous progress payment, or the development is successful and he makes a lot of money. For Sylvie, the success of the research and development is good. If it fails, he will gain nothing and waste time at the same time. An agreement was reached, and the two parties signed an investment agreement on this condition, and added many details. Krillin looked at the investment agreement jointly drawn up by the lawyers of the two parties with great interest, and did not find any loopholes. The mature business investment agreement was originally developed from the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sunday. The Eternal Blazing Sun is also the god of contract and the guardian of business. If any of his Sequence 9 lawyers could find the loopholes, they wouldn't have to mess around. Of course, with regard to the additional conditions on both sides, Krillin still suggested many areas for improvement. This made the two lawyers have some self-doubt about their professional abilities.